Springboks have won 30-22 in Cape Town, bounced back from last week. Not the most convincing win, but the biggest thing, I suppose, was to get that win. Just with me doing a quick hot take here, with me is Gavin Rich, who's at the stadium, saying there was some beautiful sort of wooden background behind him there in the press box. I know that area well. Gav, I hope you've had a beer yet. He's got one. He's got one. So let's start off, Gav. I mean, a win is a win, and that's the most important thing. But not too much to crow about other than that.
Well, Brennan, we chatted before the game, you and I, on WhatsApp, and you know that I was very bullish the whole week. In fact, ever since the last week's game ended, I thought that the Boks were going to bounce back and win by a big score, and they didn't do that. Although if they'd actually scored that try right at the end, when Urban sent out that pass to Jesse that went into touch, they would have actually finally won by 15 points, which would have put a false gloss on the score, because I don't think they deserved to win this game by 15 points. But when I heard, and when I arrived at the stadium, and it was Kobus Wiese who told me that Kobus Wiese, the commentator and former Springbok World Cup winner from '95, not Kobus Wiese, obviously the current Springbok rugby player, he told me that that Jean-Luc du Preez had pulled out, and that as an emergency, Kwagga was coming into the team, and effectively they don't really have a backup loose forward. And remembering, of course, that Rassie also had to shuffle the cards a bit earlier in the week with Willie Leroux being ruled out also because of a late injury, I did start to fear the worst then. So I think I sent you a message saying that I'm not as bullish now as I was during the week. I was concerned because the Australians do have a very good back row, and certainly they went into this game with a better back row balance than the Springboks, because although Kwagga Smith actually played really well, it's not a like-for-like replacement. I thought that this might actually be, funnily enough, be a day where Rassie might end up ruining the fact that he didn't have Evan Roos in the squad, because that would have been more of a like replacement, and then you would have had Kwagga still coming on and reprising that role he did today, as a replacement later on. As it was, we had Andre Esterhuizen coming on towards the end of the game as a loose forward, and although everybody's like raves about that and says it's great, and he is a huge specimen, as we know, it's still not. We ended up having, because I consider Kwagga a bit of a hybrid player in a way, and so is Franco Mostert at the moment. I mean, he's not somebody who's played a lot at number 7. So we effectively only had really one real specialist in their back row in the form of Marco van Staden. So in the end, I think from a South African point of view, we should just be relieved that they got through that with a win, because there were times before the game when I thought that they might be in trouble, and then during the game when I thought that the Boks might end up being in trouble.
Yeah, I think just to stick on that for a while, because I know a lot of people are probably in the comments going to bring up the Evan Roos thing. This is almost, Rassie had the option of bringing him in. He lost Peter Steff and Sia earlier in the week as well. Obviously, a lot of disruption, losing a lot of those guys there. But the fact that they didn't call up more loose forwards sort of perplexed me. And I know somewhere in the week I watched the press conference clip where somebody asked Rassie about if it's an 8-man crisis, and he sort of deflected and said, no, they've got enough players, etc. But certainly when Jean-Luc pulled out, it really felt, geez, we're really getting a bit thin here. And there are other players that could come in. I mean, he could have brought Kobus Wiese, the player, into number 8 again, like he did against Georgia. It certainly felt to me, I don't think there's going to be another situation where we're going to see a loose trio of Marco van Staden, Franco Mostert, and Kwagga Smith ever be selected for a game, because the balance just doesn't feel right. So that was the one thing. The other thing that worried me a lot, just, and I'm watching from TV angles as such, was that Australia again unlocked the Bok defense so easily. And there was 30 missed tackles. The Max Jorgensen's try and Corey Toole's try was both from kicks straight behind the box. And they didn't turn very well. And I mean, you'll remember in 2011, 2009, Peter de Villiers' time, we used to beat New Zealand by turning their wingers around quite easily, and that was with the aerial game. And that time it was the aerial game. But Australia in these two tests have stabbed the ball behind us. Last week, Edolf and Amava saved a couple. today that one of Corey Tool just looked way too easy. And Max Jorgensen one, okay, it was a bad bounce for Kane and Moody, but just there are some cracks there that are starting to show.
I just think I look at this team and also the reaction time's not great. That first try that they scored, the Box had all the game up to that point. When I say all that game, it wasn't a great game. It was never a great game today. There were too many mistakes, and I think that the Box may be a bit lucky in this game in the sense that because of the rain, it was heavy underfoot conditions. Because those instances where there were line breaks might have actually led to another repeat of what happened at Ellis Park. I really think that could have happened because those Australian backs are very quick. I mean, we have to give them credit. I mean, they've got incredible amounts of athleticism there. And I must actually own up to having underestimated the Australians before they came out here. I always thought that the Lions weren't actually really that great. I'm talking about the British and Irish Lions, and that we would expose them. It was interesting to me to actually hear Joe Smith at the press conference I've just been at talking about he thought that the Springboks' first 20 minutes at Ellis Park last week was the best window of rugby he's ever seen from the Springboks. And I felt like that. So it was nice to hear him say that because he was asked, do you think that the Boks were improved today on last week? And he sort of hedged it a bit. He sort of fudged it a bit by saying, well, you know, like saying that they weren't as good at any stage of this game as they were in those 20 minutes. And that they showed a window then of what they're capable of. But then Rusty spoke in the press conference, and he spoke about how when you lose, you do lose a little bit of confidence, and when you lose, your opponents actually, if you're playing a two-test series, which is effectively is what happened, your opponents get a lot of confidence as well. So I think that the Aussies, what impressed me about the Aussies today was their composure. They look really, really composed. I don't think we can talk about them being intimidated by the Boks anymore. But you know, just extrapolating a bit, the Aussies have come off. Well, 3 tests against the British Lions and then 2 tests against South Africa. And for most of the way, their core of their team has been the same team. Whereas the Springboks, to me, and I had a brief conversation, funny enough, with the other Kobus Visa, the commentator, as I was leaving the press box. And I said to him, because he said, you know, what do you think went wrong? And I said, well, to me, they're playing a little bit like a team that's either got too many players who are a little bit long in the tooth now and have had too many great sort of achievements in their careers, and maybe just not quite that edge and hunger that you've got before you've ever won a World Cup and before you've ever won a Tri Nations, or otherwise they're playing like a team that doesn't play together that often. And you know, Rassie has played lots of different combinations, and he rotates a lot, and he needs to rotate a lot because a lot of these players that are experienced now may not be around in 2027. So he's actually got I think he's facing a bit of a catch-22 now because I think he needs to bring new players in, but at the same time, I think he's also realized that he does still need to rely on the experienced players if he's going to win now. I do think that Rassie he was quite upbeat in the press conference. You know, he spoke about how a win is a win, you know, that old South African saying, and that after last week we just needed to win, and Andre Pollard backed him up there, and he said, you know, we just needed to win this game. That's all he's interested in. But you know, looking forward, I think that there's probably a lot for Rassie to think about, and he's probably sort of reached a sort of kind of pressure point in this World Cup cycle that he hasn't really experienced too much in previous World Cup cycles. I really do think that because in the previous World Cup cycle, let's not forget there was COVID that first year, and then he came in, and then we had the British and Irish Lions series, and then there was only 2 years till the next World Cup. This time there's a proper World Cup cycle, and he doesn't have the same, you know, he can't have the same certainty that he's going to be able to keep that same nucleus of players together in 2027, like, because the guys were still young enough to go on to 2023 last time. This time we don't really have that. This time you've got to say, well, okay, Andre's only 31. He was good today, but you know, are these guys necessarily still going to be around in 2027? So to me, he faces a catch-22.
Yeah, no, I want to caveat that by what you're saying there, because I agree with a lot of it. By the fact that the guys who performed today were the guys that are the bankers. I mean, Andre, I don't think he's missed a kick this year in the 2 tests he's played. I mean, Cheslin Colby in the air was very good. The midfield was good. Oxenchair was very good. So, I mean, the players who sort of stood up and did their job, Marco van Staden was also another one who's really having a good season. Even when he came on. Those are your bankers. And I think we were always going to fall back on them, and we kicked 35 times today. So I mean, we double what we kicked, almost double what we kicked last week. So we were always going to go back to tight this week, especially with the weather. But
Yeah,
certainly, as I agree with you, the Aussies aren't overawed, and they certainly, I think, took a lot more out of this series or these two tests than us, and we'll be very happy with their performance. I think there's some question marks about the Boks, especially ahead of Eden Park.
yeah,
I'm not too worried about Eden Park because I feel that the Boks normally lift themselves for the All Blacks anyway, so you'll cover
yeah.
some of those cracks. But long term, there are some cracks that certainly are shown.
Well, I think that okay. Firstly, I'm as up for the fact that I didn't think that the fact that they'd played the Alliance series before this series was going to be an advantage for the Aussies. But in retrospect, I have to admit that I was wrong, and that it does. And secondly, going ahead towards Eden Park, maybe the fact that we played the Aussies was perfect timing, because we have periodically, maybe we didn't have it so much last year because Australia was so poor last year. I mean, they had a lot of growing to do, and they've grown a lot since then. But we have had this adjustment now that we no longer play Super Rugby. There is a difference in the pace that the Antipodean teams or Australasian teams play it. I mean, New Zealand and Australia, they're Super Rugby. I mean, I'm not going to get into an argument about which is superior, but it definitely is more quick tempo, I think, than the United Rugby Championship, and we have periodically in the past had to adjust since we've been out of the Super Rugby, had to adjust to the pace that they bring out. I think we actually agreed when we were sitting in Nelspruit, even though the Springboks won very comfortably against the All Blacks in Nelspruit in 2022, I remember sitting there in the second half of that game thinking to myself, that they actually do struggle a bit against the quicker temper of the All Blacks, and that came home to roost the following week when we went to Ellis Park and the All Blacks won. So maybe given that the Australians have improved, given where the Australian strengths are, and where the All Blacks strengths potentially are, although I think the All Blacks are probably a better set phase side, and although the Australians didn't really go backwards in the scrums today, and the lineouts of the South African lineouts have been a problem. Well, they did go back towards the end and periodically, but I mean, generally, I think that Australia would probably have ended the series feeling that they did better in the scrums than they thought they might, and that they have against the South Africans for a while. And the lineouts, the South African lineout has looked vulnerable. So when we go to Eden Park in 2 weeks' time, I think that we'll probably find that we've had quite a good dry run against a team that, I wouldn't say they played All Black rugby, but they've got the similar strengths to the backfield and all that. They've got similar strengths to the Australians or to the All Blacks, who the Springboks are going to play next. So I think in that sense, I think it's perhaps perfect timing. But I would say that after today and after last week, and remembering, of course, that there is still a game to come later tonight, and who knows, maybe Argentina will win that, and that will change everything that we're saying now. But at the moment, you'd have to say that South Africa go to Eden Park as ranked underdogs, which may not be such a bad thing for the South Africans.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I think just one thing on the Wallabies. I mean, this game, just to underline how good they were and how we must give them credit. I mean, they lost their fullback, they lost Nick White, they lost Suhaili, all in the first half. And those are three big players for them. So, and they still were exceptionally well. The one thing I wanted to ask you, just because obviously you get a different view watching it on TV, but I certainly felt that the other thing the Boks did struggle with it over these last 2 weeks, maybe, is the fact that they were reffed by New Zealand refs, and this is not a knock against New Zealand refs in any way. I felt today the ref allowed Australia to get away with quite a bit at the breakdown. They were rolling into Grant Williams's way, and Tom Robinson on the loose head was going down every scrum, and he was saying play on, play on. And so the Boks didn't get the reward for those type of things, which they have got in the past. And I just felt there was a neck roll on Malcolm Marx, which he did see eventually after the TV screen showed it. And I'm sorry, no, he missed the one on Malcolm Marx. There was another one that he did see later on in the game. But there's a couple of things that missed, which I think the Boks got rather frustrated about. You could see the waving arms and stuff. We're not used to seeing a Bok team do that. So maybe that's another thing that also came into play. And as I said, there's not a knock on the ref. You take what you can, and the Boks need to adapt. But we're not used to Southern Hemisphere refs as well.
Yeah,
And I think
not
the
anymore.
Boks might have struggled with that as well as part of it. I mean, these are all, we're assuming now, but
Well,
I think that might be a part of it.
it was the perception of myself in the press box and some of the people I was sitting with that they were the Aussies. I wouldn't criticize the ref, but what I would say was that that the Aussies got away with the sort of they were better at the dark arts, if you know what I'm saying, and
Yeah.
especially when it came to slowing down South African ball. And there was a stat that one of our fellow journalists gave me before the game, Hendrik Cronje, that apparently this particular ref, James Dolman, had ref before this game. He'd refed the Aussies 5 times or something, and they'd won 4 of those games. And remembering, of course, that the Aussies haven't been particularly good in the last few years, so that's quite a good record. And he felt that the Aussies would enjoy playing with this ref, and I think they probably did. They did. He probably facilitated their game, but as you say, that's not an excuse for the Springboks. But maybe it's a good thing. I don't know who's going to be refing at Eden Park. Funny, it'll probably be a Northern Hemisphere ref, but it's going to be interesting because. Well, that's another wake-up call. I mean, you talk about learnings. The Springboks now have 2 weeks. I think that there's been a change in perception now. I think before this series, we all thought that the Boks were okay and that they were going to just carry on winning everything and that they're going to win the rugby championship. And maybe there was a question of, well, would they win both games in New Zealand? Would they win the one in Eden Park in particular? Now I think that there's more of a sober sort of look. And I think that I wouldn't want to call the Springboks arrogance, but there is a little bit of there has become a bit of arrogance has blown up around South African rugby, and I think we need to look all of ourselves squarely in the eye. Even myself, who sort of predicted big wins for the Springboks in these 2 games. It's been a reality check, and there's work to do to win the rugby championships now, and but they can still do it. And the one thing that the one good thing for me about these 2 games, and before I say this, I have to note that the Aussies do have injuries, so this could impact their competitiveness later on. But I do think that the way the Aussies played in these 2 games in South Africa suggests to me that they've got a good chance of winning maybe one of the games against the All Blacks. So it's not like it was in the past where you sort of feel, well, that you've got to win the games against the All Blacks because they're not going to lose to anyone else. It is possible that we could drop a game to the All Blacks in Auckland or Wellington, and then that they'll get done by the Aussies in Perth, wherever they're playing in Australia. I'm not sure if it is, but I think it is Perth. They might drop a game in Australia. So it's fascinating. It's going to be interesting to see what happens tonight, to see how much more competitive the Argentinians have become since last week, because I think they too have probably on a bit of a learning curve. They played against a New Zealand style for the first time in a while last week. Maybe they'll be more trained towards it tonight and maybe better than they were last week. So that's why I say I'm almost hedging my bets when I say the South Africans will go as massive underdogs to Eden Park, because you never know. There could be an upset later on tonight. But obviously when a lot of people watch this, it would have already happened. But it makes for a very fascinating rugby championship. And having watched the breakdown this week, the New Zealand rugby show, I think it was Jeff Wilson who was talking about the fact that the New Zealanders had beaten the All Blacks, had beaten France. Yes, it was an understrength French team, but that's not New Zealand's fault. It's almost like now that we've got maybe we should, and the Australians did really well in the Lions series. Okay, they didn't win it, but you've got to remember another thing about the Australians. They were out their top fly halves at the moment, and I reckon that if James O'Connor had played against the Lions at fly half, because he's really impressed me. Okay, he missed kicks tonight, but he's been really cool as a number 10. And if he'd been playing against Finn Russell in the Lions series, I think the Lions probably would have lost that series. I really do. So I think that there might even be a little bit of a power shift to the Southern Hemisphere, and that the Rugby Championships is actually becoming like the World Championship. Remembering, of course, that the French were under strength when they came to South Africa, but that's to France. With the French when they came to New Zealand were under strength. But that's their problem. It was their choice to come here to go there under strength. So at the moment, if you look at the world rankings, like Australia could be coming into the top 4 quite soon. South Africa are there, New Zealand are there, and I think the only other one that would be there is Ireland. That is the only northern hemisphere team. So it's quite exciting for the Rugby Championship what's been happening in these first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think also, I mean, depending on what happens, there's a couple of caveats here. I mean, if New Zealand do win tonight in Argentina, then it's going to be very difficult to win the rugby championship, because then you're going to have to at least win one of those two in New Zealand and hope that they slip up somewhere. But if Argentina win, then it's wide open again, and then it brings Australia into they could win the rugby championship, because they've got two against Argentina now in Australia next. And
Exactly.
they could on this form, you'd say they could probably win both of those, and
Yes.
then they're suddenly title contenders. So there's a lot going on there. Rusty, I believe Rusty did say that they're going to name a team of 30 tomorrow for tomorrow or Monday for
36.
the
36.
36.
36. Yeah, he's got to
Okay.
name 36. His couple of guys have to go for scans, and then they'll name the team. He says I think what you're saying that is when you say 30, he's got 30 guys in his that are certainties, and then there's another six he's got to make up his mind. I mean, I feel desperately sorry for Jean-Luc Depree. I mean, he had his first
Yeah.
opportunity, and apparently he had gastro, and they finally made the decision today. I hope that he's on the plane to New Zealand and he gets some game time there, because he's just been so desperately unlucky.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, when he said this week in the press conference, it's his first start in 7 years. You really felt for the guy, because, yeah, he's been the one guy who turns up at every Bok camp, at every time he's called up, he's always there, and you never hear
Yeah,
him complain. And you really feel like he should. And today was his chance, and he really could have
yeah,
used this game, because we did miss a big ball carrier today,
we
and
did.
we
That's why
needed
it wasn't
somebody
a
like
luck for
him.
luck. That's why I say it wasn't luck for luck. I mean, but having Quokka at number 8 wasn't luck for luck. I mean, if they had Evan Riss, and I really do believe that's an error now, and I think that maybe Rusty needs to look at that before they go to New Zealand. Remembering, of course, that Jasper Beast is coming back, and I suppose that Jean-Luc will recover and be so. Yeah, you'll probably find that Evan Riss is still out in the cold, but I just find that a bit odd. I just think that having seen him play, what was it? Was in Port Elizabeth, the second half of the Port Elizabeth test. I mean, he's the sort of the stereotype of what the Boks need as a number 8, and Jasper Visa will be back, I think, for Wellington, but he won't be at Eden Park. So
Yeah,
if we have injuries, and I wouldn't be that confident about the Boks' chances if Kwaka went in as the starting number 8 against New Zealand.
yeah, I think.
I think he's happy being an impact sub.
Yeah, I think we're going to need a big ball carrier there as well. Listen, I'm not going to keep you much longer. I think
Okay.
we've done what we wanted to do here. Unless you want to say anything more.
No. Just, I mean, Corbus Visa is obviously another option somewhere in the back row. I'm assuming that Peter Steff will be back. So, and let's hope so from a South African viewpoint, that Peter Steff will be back. Maybe Sierra as well. Don't forget how many players the Boks were missing today because of injury. I mean, they had the two wings that were out, and they had those two guys who are missed. I just looking ahead. Look, I mean, maybe we should let the people out there know that we're going to be speaking to Nick. I think on Tuesday this week, Nick Mallett.
Yeah,
So it's going to be interesting when we speak to him, and we'll both have had a chance to think about things more and to go there. But just looking at areas where I think where the Boks have a concern. One of them, I think, is Hooker, and I was told before the game that Malcolm went onto the field with a bit of an injury. I was warned that they had been a bit concerned about him this week as well. So, and I don't think that he was like at a full gallop today. And if Malcolm's not there, I'm not. I'm a bit worried about the backup, because I'm not sure that Bongi is the player that he was. We saw Marnus van der Merwe come on like quite late in the game today, and people talk quite highly of him. But there are areas where I think there's Hooker. We don't have the plethora of tight head props and loose head props that which felt like we had a few years ago or a year ago. Possibly because somebody like Gerard Steenekamp is injured and Frans Malherbe is injured, or possibly his career is over. There's not that massive depth, and that is that is a concern. Obviously, there's a lot of depth at lock, and there is a lot of depth at loose forward if Rusty gets his selections right. But there are concerns. To me, there are quite a few concerns around the Boks. And that's not what we would have said a couple of weeks ago. So maybe this has been the wake up call. Maybe this has been the necessary wake up call.
yeah. I was going to say. I mean, the one thing we've been blessed with was you talk about Gerard Steenekamp. He's one of those guys who came into the side and immediately he didn't. The level didn't drop just because he hadn't played as many tests. He made an impact straight away, and that was a huge thing for the Boxer. But let's hope he's back for the Rugby Championship as well.
Yeah,
But yeah, that thing that we've got a bunch of players now who are on 1, 2, 5 tests who who need still maybe a bit of time to get to that level, and I think that's a bit of a concern as well. But I think, Gav, I don't want to keep you. I'm sure you're going to go have another beer somewhere. And I wish I was there. I do have a bit of FOMO today. I'm not going to lie. And I would like to have been there, but go and have a beer for me at least. And thanks for taking the time in the press box to chat, man.
And we'll speak. And we'll be back chatting to Nick on Tuesday. He's in the Kruger, not able to.
Oh.
Okay,
Sorry,
it's fine.
what happened there?
Okay, I mean, what Nick's in Kruger Park at the moment. Hasn't got Wi-Fi there. He's at Shingwezi, where I've been. I know there's not much Wi-Fi there, so we'll be speaking to him when he comes back to civilization on Tuesday, and that will be interesting.
Yeah, now I'm sure Nick's going to have a lot of opinions, and there was a lot of comments about Nick's opinions last week, so it's going to be good to hear what he says as well. So have a look out for that on Tuesday. It'll be up as soon as we've chatted to him. But yeah, for now, the Boks are going to win. We should be happy about the victory, but there is a lot of work ahead. For now, Gav, thanks. Go have that beer. We'll chat again soon.
Cheers, Brendan.